Okay, that's good.
Nice. Do we have anything? I don't think we, like, on our end, we specifically have anything lined up. So I don't know if anyone has any questions to start with, but I mean, we can just get started on whatever makes sense. You can either chat them in the chat or just come on and talk about them. But yeah, like, I don't have anything else planned. So what do you guys have? Oh, there's Mark. He's in here.
Yeah, I'm Mark today.
Oh, okay. I thought he just joined because he can't stay away from work, so it would not be surprising if you see him pop in here.
Right.
I feel like there was something that I wanted to. I thought this week I was like, oh, that'd be good for office hours, but I can't remember what it is now.
Yeah, I know there was that question, I guess, response you sent back to Alex. I know he's not
summing
joining
up
today.
stuff.
Yeah, but if we need things to go over, maybe you can go over that one and
Yeah, I
you
can create
watch
that
the
for sure.
recording.
Yeah. Should I start there? I can start doing that, and then if someone has something else, feel free to interrupt, and I can either finish quickly or abandon it and just cover something else. But let me share my screen. And so, yeah, Alex's question was about like summing up values from a database. So he had like a field, one of the fields was a number, and so he wanted to add it up for each row and just output the total. And his question was more like conceptually, how do you handle that in Bildr? So I can set something up quick here and show that pretty quickly. It uses a path, which if you've been to these office hours, we talk about paths all the time. We're gonna have this UI coming out. We don't have the UI out yet, but paths are pretty powerful. It's just like really simple with a path. So say we have items, and the items have, oops, call it amount, or actually I'm going to call this quantity, which is a little better. And then if it was just like something like that, where basically each of these records, like in real life, would have other stuff, but they have some number in here, and I want to output the total number. What I can do, there's a couple ways to do this too, just like everything else in Bildr, but like the most straightforward way to show it, if I just had a number on the page, is I can run a flow where I, in one shot, calculate that, like total it from the database and spit it out here. So we would say a flow called display total. And that would be, the first thing is we'll set a variable to get that total. So the way I'm going to do it is I'm going to pull in all the rows I need from the database, from the data collection input. And then I'm going to add a path on there that says to sum them up. So I'll create this on the current page and just call it total, I guess. So I come from a data collection and I want to get all those items, that collection I just created. So I can select the items collection, and the field I want to total up is quantity. So I can either select quantity as my field, or I can actually still do this if I do get all fields like this. And then the rest, I don't really have to change. Like you could, depending on what you're outputting, you could have filters set and other stuff, because maybe you're outputting just the total of certain rows, whatever. But in my case, for this demo, I'll just total all the rows. So I basically set that. So now I have a variable called total. And then I can set into the element. So I'll do set element value. Put a weight in between. And I'll set the element of this total to the variable first. So I call that variable total. And here I can add a path. And so the path is like this. It's sum, as in like adding things up. So if I do sum like that, I just have to put the actual column that I want to sum up in here. And there's one step in there, because to do that, I can't actually type, the column name was quantity. I can't actually do that. I need to get the ID. So if I actually go into the data collection items and the quantity column field, this 3 dot will show me the ID. So I can just hit a copy button right there. And so if I do sum and pop the ID in there, it'll sum up those values and set them into this total. I think anyway, it's been a while since I've done it. So let's see if we preview. Oh, I have to run the function. So I just created that flow over here, display total, but I didn't actually run it. So I'll do it on page binding. I'll just nest in display total. Now if I refresh, that's the total of all those records, 18. And so that's kind of like the most isolated example way to show that. But as you can imagine, like for something like we have that portfolio tracker we put out, like I'm using this kind of stuff pretty much all over the place where there's a path. Sum is one thing, but there's tons of different little paths you can do to manipulate or like, I guess manipulate's the right word, to change data or like format it for how you want it in one quick shot, those paths. So I kind of explained that to Alex in text form, but if I wasn't clear enough, now he can actually come back and watch this. That's how you do it. So yeah. Let me see, I haven't been watching the chat. So this question I'm reading here is about using roles and navigating with Xano as the backend.
Yeah, this is Guy. That's what I'm trying to assess right now. Whether it's with Xano or some other backend database that has the full user authentication process in place. I've been trying to set this up with Bildr, and it's really how to facilitate managing the navigation and access to different pages, different routes within Bildr. For that, the native stuff in Bildr just has if it's authenticated or not, but within the context of Bildr. And I'm curious if there's a way to try to dovetail that with an external system. So it yeah. So I mentioned this earlier in the Discord channel, and there's a few different ways to do this, but it's not very clean. And I was curious if there was if any thought has ever been given to this, or looking at alternatives. For example, WeWeb seems to have just introduced something similar that will bind into whatever role structure might be present in Xano. Anyway, just thought I'd ask a question here.
Yeah, no, it's a great question. And we have like an interesting thing right now with roles and with authentication and routes and all that stuff, where if you do use builders, like built-in everything, it's pretty seamless and it's really good. But then like you're getting at, like as soon as you use something else as a backend, it kind of gets tricky. And so, and you can do it, like you can have full roles and you can reroute people, but you kind of have to like really think about it's like custom, like you have to think about your own flows and what you're going to do and how you're going to set it up. And so what we're in the process of doing, which I actually wish Mark was here because he knows way more. And Dorian, I don't think you know much about it too yet, right? This new route system we're doing where it authenticates.
The custom claims.
The custom claims.
Yeah, I'm actually taking over that from Mark. I'm just starting to learn all the pieces, so I don't have all the info on it yet. But yes, that is coming.
But I think that will solve this issue basically. And like I can at least speak to it from like a high level. But what it is like you'll have a way to. We're calling them, I mean, they are claims in code, but like we're calling them custom claims because basically you'll have a way to present, like you can do a custom function, a server-side function that does any checks you want. So for some examples could be like talking to Xano and seeing if they're authenticated or not. That's one thing, or seeing what their role is in Xano. But another thing that we're working with too is like with NFT and Web3 stuff, we can actually check tokens, but you can do a number of checks on the server and then it will return the Bildr like, true or false. Basically, it'll say if you're allowed to see a page or not allowed to see a page, or maybe if you're allowed to change a route, depending on what we do. So what it is we're like taking all of that like all of that burden of like all the edge cases and figuring out how everything mixes in that we would have now. And we're just putting it into a custom functions. And then we're going to put out a bunch of functions. So we'll have a function pre-built for Xano, I'm sure, or at least at some point we will. And we'll have some pre-built ones for like token checking. But at the same time, you'll be able to, the same way you can create a custom action now, you'll be able to create like a custom check that will return a claim. And it'll all happen server side. And it'll all happen like, you know, kind of like integrated into the Bildr Studio, the way that our current, because currently if you use the Bildr database users, you can do all that rerouting, no problem. So I think it'll be a lot more similar to that, where you can take advantage of Bildr stuff and you don't have to build it yourself. I don't know, like, I don't know when that, I wouldn't even be able to say when that's coming out. I mean, months, not years, you know, like it's soon, it's in process, and we think it's important and we want to do it for the Web3 stuff too. But I would say, yeah, that'll solve it. And then in the meantime, yeah, I mean, pretty much like the way I would do it in the meantime is I would actually create kind of like a shell page that does the authentication and then loads another page in or redirect or like does something there so that the point of it would be that shell page is like not hackable. Like whatever's on that shell page is nothing until something's authenticated and loads in. That's probably the best we can do right now. And like I said, it'd be a little tedious in certain cases. I did see, and I don't know, I don't think it was you, but maybe it was even you, but I did see someone was like mirroring their users. So basically they would like, if a Xano user's created, they create it in Bildr's system.
Yeah, that
and
was
mirror
one of
them.
the answers. That's one of the answers, and I explored that as well. It's not
Yeah.
the login without password. You end up having you're hitting your user twice.
Yeah, and I think that would be tricky in any
Yeah.
way. Like that's a kind of a weird way to do it.
Yeah, what the one angle that I was looking at, and if that's the one of the paths you're taking, of course, there's a lot of pros and cons to baking claims within a GWT token. You can do that, but a lot of backend systems will do that, and you can do this with Xano, with Azura, or others. But then on the Bildr side or on the front end tool side, how to decode that token, that would be one way of doing this if you had access to that key. So you can at least securely determine what claims are within that token. And I haven't found a way to do that yet. So the alternative is not as safe. So you could look at the user object and you know, put that in a cookie of some sort, but then or a variable, but then you're exposing data that you really shouldn't.
Right.
So okay, I understand the timing, and I'm glad that there's an understanding of that as a potential requirement for flexibility, because you'll get people working with different backends as well. So
yep, different backends and also roles too. A lot of people ask us about like, are there built-in roles? Like they want to have an admin role. And what we always do is build it ourselves, and this actually will solve for that too. We're gonna have all that stuff built in.
Yeah, the backends like Xano and others provide a lot of functionality as far as granular, you know, field level control for the roles. That's great, but then on the front end, how do you manage the navigation part and the authentication part? So that's just that small bridge that remains to be done. But glad you're on it.
Yeah, I think we're going to solve it. Hopefully this will solve it for everyone, but we'll see, because we haven't implemented it yet. But either way, we'll eventually solve it for sure.
Thanks. Appreciate it.
So let's see. And you guys, anyone can chime in if I get this out of order, but I'm just like looking through and I see what's the optimal way for updating grid rows to their Xano records, to their own Xano records. I actually don't know the optimal way for this, but like basically if you want to update a bunch of Xano records at once, that's the question. You can do it either way, really. I think, I'm not an expert with Xano either, but you could probably send them all at once, or actually in a grid row in Bildr, you can run an action on each row, and you can, like on the main page, you can run a flow that does it all at the same time. So you can actually do them each individually pretty simply in Bildr too. And I don't know, maybe with a large data set, you'd hit a rate limit or something in Xano, but I don't think there's actually technically an optimal way, is my point. I would probably try to do it all batched together. I'll just create a big JSON string and then pass that to Xano in like a regular API call. But I'm not sure if you want to elaborate more on that, or if that's not answering your question. Feel free to chime in. I'm just going to keep reading through these. I don't know if you guys can hear my dog. He's going nuts outside. Oh, yeah, I can show you how to create that tree. So Abda's asking if I can show how to create that JSON string. I see someone's at my front door. Yeah, so let's see. Let me think of a good scenario. So updating all grid rows. So let me pop a grid in here. I'm just going to, I'll keep that there. That's fine.
You can't
I'll
keep
do
it
this
simple,
grid.
by the way.
Oh, sorry. Feel free to chime in. Yeah.
I was just saying, you don't need to think of a complicated scenario, just a simple one with a couple of grid rows and that's it.
Cool. So yeah, so then I'll just do, I'm just gonna, that items collection I made, I'll just display the number for each one. So I'll make this row page and just do a similar little output on it. But I'll bind this to items quantity, and then I'll set this grid list to row page. Just double check it. All right, it's kind of hard to see. It's on the edge of my screen, but it is showing the quantity for each of those. So I'm just gonna put some padding while we look at this. Okay. So there's a couple things going on here when once you're at this stage where you're outputting in the grid list. The value of this actual grid list is the JSON that's inside of it. So actually, I can probably show this while I'm talking. I can output to a text area. So I'm going to do this with a button. So we're going to say. So one thing I can do is I can actually just use the value of that grid, or sometimes the data. Sorry, my typing's crazy. So if I do set value of this text area just to display this, and I have it come from the element value grid list like this, that'll probably work in itself to output it here. So I'm just going to put a button so I can control this. Wow, it's all out of order. So you can see if I just do get value, it's going to give me a JSON array of each object. So I don't know why I can't, it's hard to just discern where the objects start and stop because I think there's an array inside here. Looks like that's the first object. And so that'll give you a lot. And depending on what you want to do with saving it to Xano, you'll probably need to like format this. But that's certainly one way. And this will include, if you do get value on here, and Dorian, you probably don't just correct me if I get this wrong, but if you do get value on here, it's going to output every variable that's on the page as a key in the JSON, and then whatever the value is. So like every variable. So if you create variables in these rows, like say that, just on this one row, there's a button and you click and it creates a new variable, like just that one row will have that variable. Like it just will output everything that's in each row as JSON. But there's a few other things, like if you change this to data, that's actually like the underlying data that's set into it. So it won't include new variables you create, but it will include, like if you're bound to a collection like I am, it'll include a variable, like a key for each collection field. So there's a couple different things. And if you filter it with a search, you can do just the search result data. So there's a lot you can do in there, and that'll essentially control like the initial JSON that you spit out. And then, like I said, like you might after that go in and do some kind of like a transform. Sorry, computer's slow here. There's all these JSON transform things where you can remove specific keys or change key names or, you know, whatever. So you might need to format that. And then on Xano's end, I think you'll have to create your endpoint. Like you'll have to be expecting to accept this JSON, but maybe not even. But at that point, you just send the JSON over and it should be ready to go. All right, looks like that works for you as a solution. So that's like probably the most straightforward way. You could actually do other things where within each row, you kind of concatenate together a JSON string. You can do more, but if that works, that's the way I would recommend.
All right, thank you very much.
No problem. Did I miss any in here too, or is there just yeah, like I said, feel free to shout out if I did miss you. I'm not trying to skip anyone or go out of order.
Yeah, I don't think so. I think you got them all.
And I don't know if maybe I should just I could just do some other kind of random demo too. If that
Drew, I
makes
did
sense.
have a question.
Cool, yeah.
So trying to work through the Morales connectivity stuff, setting up that Web3 connection. We noticed, so we got the button set up to click to log in, and then eventually it'll populate the name in the field where we want it, basically the Metamask wallet or whatever. When we did that and we played with the weights and not weights, it seems like it took about a good 20 seconds for it to do the connect. And then once it connected, it sat there and just waited for a little bit. And then eventually it would pop up into the box. And I didn't know if that was something like maybe it's being throttled from Morales' side. I'm not 100% sure, but wasn't really able to track it down.
Is that like when you connect, you mean, or we just do like a regular API call to Morales?
And we even did the same with MetaMask, and it did the same kind of behavior. So like you click on the connect button, MetaMask pops up, you hit the button to approve, and then it says, okay, cool. And then it spits out the wallet address in the inspector. And then if you go back and you just basically wait for a while, and then it pops up into the box where it's supposed to pop up into, like basically just a div where it puts the address in there and it's concatenated and all that.
That sounds weird, I think. Because especially if it happens with MetaMask too. Because like normally when I use MetaMask for that exact thing, it's pretty instant. But so like within each action itself, there's an option to make it pause the queue, it's called. So basically to make it wait. And then in your flows, you can make it wait between each action. Mm-hmm. So it's possible that something weird's happening in there. Like maybe, I'm not sure, because so like when you run a connect action, the way we made the MetaMask action, we put the action in there and it pauses the queue. But when MetaMask is successful, there's like an option in the action that you can set a flow, like a run this flow on success. And the reason we did that is because it's actually different than if you put a wait on it and run something after. Like we were seeing different results. So I think just all that is to say, it makes sense. Something in there is probably just like a little out of whack and causing it, but I think you can fix it. So I don't know if you want to like share your screen or try to go over, we can look through it, or whatever makes sense to you, but I feel like that is an error, like that is not correct, and we'll be able to solve it.
So I guess the thing would be like, if you want to run a few things as actions in sequence, it's almost better to put them as outputs in the options versus running the actions in. That way you can just drop down to select which action you want to run.
Yeah, sometimes. So like for an API, for an action that is like an API or that uses an API where it has to talk to another system, mm-hmm. I basically have started to always do that now. Like I build the action, I'll wait until the actual response comes back. And then in the action, there's like a Bildr function. It's like a one-line function you can use to run an action. So I'll say like when the response comes back, run the success action. And doing that, I just found is like more reliable than, because the other way to do it, basically, if you put in the action, you can put a stop queue on it. You can say, wait, pause the queue until this action's over. So it does the same thing in theory. It waits till the response comes back, then it continues the queue. But that's just like, it's not always reliable, even though it's generally reliable. Like it's sometimes a little weird, but B, you can't like use another action right after it. So there's a couple of reasons why I kind of switched this method, but I've just found that it's much more reliable to say exactly when the response comes back, run this flow. And then you know every time, because then you can also say, if the response comes back and it's an error, run a different flow. So you start to get a lot more control. So that's how our new API action is built now. We used to not have that. We used to just like, you run the API action, you put a wait, you know, after it, you can check a variable to see if it's an error or not. Right. But now we built it in with those options for the run flow and success, run flow and error. And I think it's just more reliable. So that could be one thing, but I don't know, that may or may not solve your issue. Like there could still be other stuff in there.
Yeah, and I think I'm gonna have to start doing what you were doing here with the outputting putting the output and dropping it into like a text box or somewhere, so I can actually see it come up on the screen.
Yeah, I do that all the time. You can do it with variables too, because if you do it, I think I can probably even show it on here. If you do it with a variable and you do this like BRW thing that we've shown sometimes, and there's a video on this somewhere too, but I can share that exact line. When you look at the variables and you have it as an array, like this one total, you can actually use it like a full array. So it's kind of cool. So that's another way. So I'll either put it into a text box like this, although you can't, it's not really like you can't parse through it as easily, or I'll output it, just like output it on the root as a variable and check it down here. But I'm always doing that, always popping stuff on the page just to see an output and then deleting it later.
Okay. Yeah, I might just have to go back in there and just reverse engineer the MetaMask Connect and see if that makes a little bit of a difference. Because I noticed with the MetaMask Connect on another page that I did, it actually worked and it worked fine. So it was weird that it wasn't working that way.
I just thought of something else too, as you're saying that, is we're gonna launch a new, I think today we're gonna put the Web3 button live in the studio, and that has this MetaMask, like it's a block basically. So you drop it on and it's a full MetaMask flow that includes like a bunch of error handling if you're like on the wrong network, handling if they switch their wallet. So actually, if you're thinking about that stage of redoing it anyway, like you just pop that on and it should just all work for you.
Yeah, I really wanted to do the Morales thing because it seems like it's just a better alternative to getting the API from OpenSea.
Yep. I just started using Morales API. I had to do a snapshot for the Dead's NFT collection, and I just pulled it out with Morales and realized that it's so powerful. It's like such a good API. So I'm gonna actually switch. GMLFG uses a bunch of OpenSea stuff and a bunch of Etherscan stuff. Yep. I'm gonna switch a lot of that over to Morales, I think.
Oh, cool. I'd love to like hang out or surf over your shoulder if you don't mind.
I can also do videos, and that's a good point. Is I should do videos when I switch all this stuff anyway. Just to share them.
Okay. Yeah, that was my question.
Cool.
Appreciate it.
So let's see. I see another question, but Dorian might have answered it.
Yeah, hopefully that answers the question there.
Grid. Array index. Maybe it's good just to talk about array index. That's what I don't know if you're not looking at the chat. This couple chats here are about the underscore array index variable. That's kind of a default. I mean, it is a default, but you can get rid of it on these on any grid list here in the properties. There's this toggle, include array index, and it's I don't know if I've ever toggled it off. I mean, maybe I've toggled it off, but like really, like I almost always keep it on, and I use it for a lot of stuff because it's like was mentioned in the chat. It's a way to call an action on a specific row. We actually have this. I'm just going to do this randomly in here just to show you this action. We have this run flow on page action, and I think this is missed all the time. But say you want to run a flow on a different page, like I don't even know if there's a flow on here. If I can do this. So I want to run that flow. There's this variable name and variable value fields here. And what that actually means is you toggle this on, say run it all and on all like in a grid list, there's 3 rows or 6 rows, or whatever, run on all the instances of that row. And you can actually say like where array index equals 0, which would be the first one, or where array index equals 100, which would be, and choose to run an action just on one specific row. So this array index becomes pretty powerful, and that array index can come from a variable. So like when you're looping, like a lot of times I'll set a variable to loop through a grid list, and I'll say set the variable to 0, run a flow, increment the variable by 1, rerun that flow, increment the variable by 1, like stuff like that, where you can really use array index to do so much stuff. And then when you do like drag and drop reordering and stuff like that, you can use it where more complex interactions, like you just need to know that number of each row basically. So it becomes really useful. And yeah, it's everywhere in the grid rows, it's on each row, and it's updated live. Like if you do reorder something, it'll update itself live. So you can always use it as kind of like a real-time, index or ID per row. Any other questions? Anything? I wish I could remember some of the stuff. Normally Cora is here, and she like during the week, she's like writing down things we can talk about, and she organizes it. And beforehand, she preps us. She's like, okay, like Mark, you're going to talk about this. Drew, you're going to talk about this. And since Cora's out right now, like this morning, we're like, hey, are we still doing office hours today? Like we're like so disorganized. So I wish I had more. I know there's at least one thing, or maybe a couple things this week where I was like, oh, it'd be good for office hours. One thing I can mention while I'm looking through stuff here is we did yesterday, we posted some release note, or today we're about to post some release notes for a release we did, I think last week, or maybe even the week before. Or was it this week? Oh, my time's all screwed up, but we did a release recently and didn't announce it because we didn't have these notes done, but they're done now. So they'll go live. And that includes, actually I can show, we showed it last time, that actions, the big new thing it includes is this actions, where you can go to bildr.com/actions and get documentation basically on all these actions. And we're working through, I think Mark's probably through 40 or something, he said, out of 120 actions that are in here right now. But it's like, I don't know if this one's done. Yeah, it's like some screenshots explaining what each of the inputs are. This one only has one input, that kind of thing. And you can get to it from the studio. When you're on an action, you can click learn more and get to any of these, or like, you can search for the ones and learn about all these actions. So we started putting that into place, which is kind of a big thing because we're so poor with documentation right now. And we're going to do the same thing for elements, patterns, probably templates, I assume. So basically we're going to have these public pages where it's like documentation, but just like a slightly different spin on it. That's what I call it. Because it's going to be this interesting dynamic way to document, and we'll have videos and all the stuff in these. And then when someone asks a question about something, say we make a video and a response in Discord, we'll actually pop that into this actions page. So it's there for the future, that kind of thing. Okay, good. Here's a question. Switch condition example. Yeah, I can show that. I don't know if a switch condition would necessarily solve that weight problem or not.
No, that wasn't for the API response. That was for Trojan's response on doing multiple statements on a single condition action.
Oh, I see.
Yeah.
Multiple statements, that wouldn't work with a switch, I don't think, really. I mean, you could make it work with a switch, but really multiple conditions. This is not my favorite thing about Bildr, to be honest, but you just chain conditions together.
Yeah.
So like I can just set one up. So I'll say like condition 1 is a condition. So wait, was that condition switch question different or related? Like, should I go over condition switch also? Because I can.
Yeah,
But
I think it's good to show.
I'll just do one of each.
Show the differences. Yeah.
Yeah, that's cool. So condition compare value is 1. So the thing here says if A equals B. So we'd say if A equals B, that'd be condition 1. And then here, normally you'd say like do one thing or do another thing. But what I'd actually do is I would just set up like condition 2 here. And so if you want to do if A equals B and B is greater than 0, so condition 1 say if A equals B, you know that's true. So run condition 2. And then you can even leave this blank, or depending on your application, you might do something else if it fails. But if you leave it blank, nothing will happen. So then condition 2, you just do another condition in there. Oh, I did the wrong one, but I'll show that in a second. In this case, you'd say B is greater than 0. And now you know, and then here's where you run your like actual if they're both true flow. Because you know from condition 1 that the first part is true, and then 2 that the second part's true. So that's how I would do that. And the reason I said it's not my favorite is because I really wish there was a better way, but and I probably will be at some point, but it's actually like not the end of the world. You know, I don't run into problems with it or anything, and it's always fine. But I can show too while I'm in here. That was the condition, like a specific 1-to-1 A to B compare values condition. We also have this switch. It's kind of the same thing, but instead of saying if A equals B, do something, you would want to say if A equals B, do one thing, if A equals C, do another thing, if A equals D, do a third thing. So the test value would be A. And then here, I'll ignore this for 1 second, but then I would say if A equals B, do that flow. If A equals C, do a different flow. That kind of thing. And then this flow to run if no match is that if you're creating options. So if A equals B or C, it'll run these flows. But what if in this scenario A equals Z? You can run like a default flow if there's nothing found. That's the only difference between the conditions, which is like one is just a direct, comparing 2 things. The other is if you're expecting one of many results and you want to do different things. But I think for me, at least 99% of the time, I'm using the first one anyway. I rarely use switch. I think other people probably use it more than me.
Could you not go in there into the condition compare and just create a custom action where you can add additional like an and operator and an or operator, and then add some more lines to it?
You could definitely do that. Like say you only, it's like a really specific scenario where you're going to be comparing 2. Because right now, if you modified it like that and then you wanted to do a normal one, you wouldn't be able to, that kind of thing. But you could easily come in here and just duplicate it. And I think it's like I haven't even really looked at the function for this ever. But if I come into the function that runs this into simple and go into the JavaScript, I mean, it's got some stuff. You could definitely do it, but if you want to do it right, like there's some good stuff. It looks like in here that's kind of like making sure all the values are good before it's doing them. It's like handling true and false and numbers and strings and accounting for all the different cases. So to do it right, you probably want to match this style. But I was going to see if I could quickly find like where to just add it in. It's actually pretty complex in here. So like, I don't know off the top of my head, but you could definitely add it in here, or you could add it in like a maybe better way where you add more inputs. So if you come to that original actual action, you could add test value 1 and test value 2 in here, and you could and an operator for the test value. So you could definitely get that done for sure. I find that like, at least for me, I've never had to do that. Most things, I'll do custom actions all the time. Like most things where I come to it and I'm like, I'm going to use this a couple times, or this is different enough, I'll just create a custom action because it's pretty fast for me at this point. But I've never actually felt the need to customize that. I just like in that case would do chain 2 conditions together probably. It's like slightly annoying, but really not that bad. I can't totally follow these API questions. Like, should I talk about something with these API calls here?
Yeah, the first question was it started from Frazier. He said, do you have a best practice approach to keep a user notified when an API call has not yet returned?
I would do it like this. Let me create a new page so it's a little cleaner. So or I can call this flow make API call. So if I had a function where like, say I was clicking a button or whatever happens, it's going to make the API call. All you have to do to actually make the API call is use the API call action like that. But what I would actually do is like if say I know that they're going to trigger this by clicking a button, I would, when they click the button, the first thing I'll do is like set something in here. So actually let me put something on the page. And like I would do this not with just a text box probably, obviously, but like this would be the status. And I'll just say, actually, I'll do this like a little bit in a more correct way. I'll say set status calling and like set status, complete or something. But it's just changing some output. So in this case, I'll set the element value of that status thing to say, waiting or loading or something. And then complete, same thing. But I'll make it say complete. And then on that API call action, I'll just run it like this. Like the first thing I'll do is nest the set status calling, let it make the API call. And then on the API call, on the success action or the error action, well, probably on both of those, I'll nest in another set status. But for like this, for ease in this one, I can just say on success, set status complete like that. So all that'll do is it'll change this to waiting until something comes back from the API where it'll change to complete. So that's probably the easiest way. I don't know if that's what you're getting at too, but like that was pretty foolproof, I think. As long as you don't change that waiting, in a different way. Like if I did another action here, and this gets into what I was just talking about with pausing the queue versus waiting and stuff too. Like if I were to say like a set value here of something else, and then just put a wait here, I can't necessarily guarantee that all these things are going to happen in order now. But in theory, this will wait until it gets any response and then set this value. So you could set it as waiting, make the API call and set it there. But instead, with this new API call, we built in these callbacks for success and error. So for a fact that when that comes back, that's when it's going to change it. And it'll never change it too early. It'll never some APIs will like time out or do something weird and it'll go to the next flow and you don't even understand why. Like there's things that happen. So keeping it in the flow to success basically is the key there.
Yeah, and this will probably be a nice use case too for using like Lotties, for showing
showing like a
how
little
it shows that it's
yeah. But yeah, I think that's really the only way. And then other than that, it's like you can't do anything until you get a response back. So with this method, you just have to wait and then handle it. Because sometimes like a timeout will not actually give you a response. You'll want to do something else, that kind of thing. Just put that all in the flow to run on success or flow to run on error. I mean, really both. You need to handle both. Yeah, there's not another approach. I can't think of one because I think that's just like, there's no other way you'd interject there, but yeah, you might just want to do something in the UI itself for a 15-second wait. Like if I have something that's waiting 15 seconds, which I actually like rarely get in that scenario these days, but if there is, like, you might want to like put something on the screen and then 2 seconds later change it to something else and like have something moving, because like all that movement will just help it see. Like that's the kind of stuff I would do more than anything technical. Yeah. Oh, you can. Now this would be complex, but he just said process indicator in the chat. In theory, with the fetch, you can, I think. Oh no, you can't do it with that. I was gonna say you could show like a progress indicator, like 1%, 2%. You can't actually do that with an API call. I take it back. What else? Anything else? We got 10 minutes left in the hour. Oh yeah, you could fake it. That's a good call. Oh, what's up, Ray? I had a call with Ray yesterday. Nice to see you in here. Well, don't get stuck at 90% for 5 minutes. Anybody have anything I could just, any like non-going over stuff, like any just general questions or anything? Should I
Drew, could
update
you
on
show,
something? Okay.
I was just gonna ask whether you could show, like, for those of us who haven't used this with the Web3 part before, what the experience is like for just connecting to MetaMask and using a smart contract for your backend.
Yeah. I'll probably just show, so there's a couple things. Let me think of the best way to show this actually. Maybe if I open the Web3 site. So this is like our the site where you buy our NFT passes. So on this site, we connect to MetaMask and we go to a smart contract for the total supply to show the totals, and we go to a smart contract to actually mint. So connect to MetaMask is like an action in Bildr. So it's pretty easy to do the initial setup. So I'm just gonna figure out what this action is, this flow is. So I have a flow connect to MetaMask. So we have this, just this action that you can use. And what I alluded to a second ago though, is we're gonna have this other thing under blocks here that'll put in like a more built out MetaMask that you don't have to do anything, you don't have to care about. This one will, it'll pop open the box, they connect, and then it'll return their wallet address, but that's all it does. So like you have to like handle errors yourself, handle if they switch the network, you know, there's stuff, it's kind of actually, it's technically embarrassing, but we don't even have these filled out on this production project that we're running, but you've got the options. So you run the action, you give it a variable for the wallet ID that it's going to return, and then you just choose a flow to run on success, a flow to run if the user says cancel or rejects the connection, a flow for general error, and then there's a flow in here for account change. So if they're on one wallet and MetaMask connected and they switch the wallet, you can have Bildr run a different flow. But that's the basics of connecting. And once you're connected, like in a session, you have to connect with MetaMask every session that you come in. You can run automatically in the background, but you still have to do it each time. So basically every time a user comes in, they connect, or it automatically connects for them, and you have a variable called MetaMask wallet. And you can use that like throughout the whole rest of your application. So in this case, they're connected, and that flow success, you know, I just changed things. So this connect to mint button is going to become a button that says mint. Like I just update the UI with whatever I need. I know I have that variable, and actually I got to check what flow it changes it to so I can show it. So basically just to go through it, it's like you connect on success, it runs set state wallet connected. That's going to like, so here it's setting the value of the button instead of connect to mint. Now it has a little diamond, and it says mint your pass. And I do that like on a couple of buttons here. It's like repeated, and I set the interaction on that button, which is what I was looking for, which is going to be instead of clicking and running connect to MetaMask, now when you click that button, it's going to run artwork mint holder pass, or if it's, you know, I don't know if you can see this exactly, but there's like 3 passes. So this one will mint holder pass, this one will mint studio, this one will mint collection. But what those are, and those are on a different workspace. Let me switch over. This one. So what those are is also like pretty simple in practice, but you do have to know a little bit about the smart contract that you're working with. So this is probably the flow mint token. So yeah, so here, when you click that mint button, it's running a flow on a different page, which is why I switched to a new workspace, etc., like on the actual artwork page. But it ultimately comes down to this mint to smart contract action, which again, in Bildr, it's like one action. So that could be in the middle of any other different flows, wherever it is, but you run this action. And this is probably like, so this action isn't live for everyone in the studio today, but like we can give it to anyone because we're using it, and it's going to be live very soon. We're just making it like more user friendly, basically, because there's some stuff in smart contracts that you just have to know, and we're kind of like figuring out how to make it easy. But this version, I enter a contract address for the smart contract. Here I upload a file for the smart contract ABI, and the ABI is like basically everything you do when you're interacting with smart contracts, you're using an ABI in some form. It's kind of like it's just a part of doing this stuff. And so in this case, you can pull the ABI out of the contract and you can pull it on Etherscan. It's like something that's accessible for anyone to get. In this case, we went to our contract address on Etherscan and pulled the ABI file down. One of the biggest changes we have in when these functions will come out is we're going to have most of the ABI stuff built in for you. So you don't have to care about that at all. So like for a total supply function in the smart contract, the ABI is like what describes how to use that function kind of thing. It's like a bridge between the Web 2, Web 3 almost, you can think of it. We're going to just build a bunch of the standard ones into the background. So you won't even have to care about this. But right now, that's what it is. You do contract address, ABI file, set your price. And then in this case, because it's a Mint function, it's giving me like 4 different responses. And that's specific to Mint function. Well, it's specific to, I think, send functions are called. I'm not even sure if that's the right term, but there's a smart contract specific thing. You can either read information or you can send or change the state. When you change the state, you get 4 callbacks. So we get a hash callback and we just set a flow to run. We get a confirmation. You actually get like 1 million confirmations, but we run this flow just on the first confirmation. You get a transaction receipt that comes back. So you can run a flow in the transaction receipt. And then you have the option, if there's an error, you can run a flow in the error. And so between all that basically you just kind of piece together. So in this case, they click the Mint button. This is the smart contract that's already deployed. This is the ABI. Here's the price, which like in our case, we have to update the price as it gets to different tiers, the price changes. Like we just come in here and manually change the price, and then we run these flows. And so we built a whole UI in our case. This is some of it here where it's going to pop up a little modal, and then it's going to say something on the modal like check MetaMask. And then in this one, like when the first transaction hash comes back, that means you sent the transaction, but it's not approved yet. Like it's not official on the blockchain, but it did something, right? So on this one, we run a flow where we set a variable for that transaction hash, like change something on the modal that pops up. Like I'm probably changing the text there to say like transaction started, please wait. And then I start doing stuff. In my case, this is like specific to the Bildr Web3, but we start creating the image and saving some stuff to our database and that kind of thing. And then ultimately from Mint, the thing that the way you know a Mint is done is when the transaction receipt comes back. So at the point where the transaction receipt comes back for us, we're doing a few other things, and we're just doing, in this case, a manual API call to create the metadata for that token. So it's a little custom, and that's why we don't have it in the studio yet, is because we want to make it less custom. We want to have the option to be custom, just like everything else, obviously, but we want to make this a little bit easier, so you don't have to do so much of your own work, your own legwork. But that's basically how you do it, and I mean, it's in the grand scheme, relatively very simple for what it actually does.
Can we just go back to Mint token for a second? Just and if it's okay, just me to ask one more question before we're all done here.
Yeah.
The Mint to smart contract. Okay, I see how it defines the contract. I see how you're getting the ABI. I see how you're setting the native token to get passed through. What I'm not seeing is where it decides which function to run on the contract.
Oh, right. So in this case, because in a final in a final action that we're gonna produce, well, actually, I shouldn't say that because we're not sure how we're gonna do this, but we could have an action where you select a function in the action. So you might select Mint, you might select total supply, you might select balance of, and we could have that. What we actually think we're going to do now that I'm talking about it is we're going to probably have like a bunch of different actions that are specific where you don't actually select it. So you have a Mint action, and behind the scenes, that Mint function is coded in. And then you have a total supply action, and behind the scenes, that total supply is coded in. So we'll have like all the standard ones, and then we'll have one that's run a custom smart contract function. And so for the custom one, you can just type in your function, you can type in your parameters, but that'll be like, people who use that will be advanced, kind of like by definition. So that'll be like for people who know what they're doing a little bit, and it'll be open-ended, but probably a little harder to understand. And then we'll have like these other ones that are much simpler to understand, but you won't actually decide on that function. And so where it is, like in this case, I have it hard-coded into that function. So I can come in and all the actions and all the elements, like everything in your Bildr project is contained in your Bildr project. So I can just come into that Mint function, Mint to smart contract in the JavaScript. And it's right here is where I'm just hard coding that Mint right there. And in this case, and this is like a funny one, actually, now that I'm looking at it, because in this case, we have those 3 passes and we're using the same mint function, but one of the contracts takes no quantity. It can only mint 1, the collection pass. The other 2, you can actually specify a quantity. So I had to do this weird like if statement in here. So this is like totally custom for the mint, but one of my mint functions that has no parameters is here. The other one has a parameter of 1 here. So it's kind of like a weird thing, but you can see how even that simple example, like there's a lot of custom stuff I put in. So that's why it's a challenge for us to get these actions so straightforward. But that's how you do it. And you can even see in here all the different things. So it's like window to contract methods mint, that's calling the mint. Here's my parameters, which is set up here. So I've got like a to, a from, here's the some contract address data stuff. Here's the value, which is the price, setting a default gas, like it's all in here. And when we have the real action, you're gonna actually be able to just set that all with inputs.
Thanks, Ben.
Hopefully that answers your question. I just kind of went off on some stuff there, but it's crazy. Like it's kind of cool to see this, and even this stuff might change significantly. So who knows? Because we're learning it and making it at the same time. Another one? Oh, saying bye. Okay. I wasn't watching the chat. Thought he was raising his hand to say, got another question. So yeah, I mean, I don't know. It's 11, so I'm cool to keep going if you want, or we can go. But I'll leave it up to everyone. And if no one has anything, we can hang for a minute and then I'll probably just end it. I'm trying to think too if there's even like an announcement or something I can make, but I don't know. Cool. Yeah, we should probably just call it, right? You think, Dorian?
Yeah, I think so.
All right, cool. So yeah, thanks for coming, and I'll try to maybe like take over Cora's role this week and organize better for next time. But if not, we'll just do this again.
That was awesome. That was my first one. Much appreciated. Thanks, guys.
Cool. Thank you.
See you guys.
All right.
Take it easy. Thank you.